Faith like a mustard seed, Part 1. My father was a preacher, but he was far from a man of God. He was an ill-tempered, angry man, and I don't mean fire and brimstone, holy justice on the unrighteous angry. I mean cold cock my mama in the jaw because the meatloaf was cold, angry. I was terrified of the man, though his wrath was usually reserved for the fairer of the sexes. He beat on me some too, sure, but it was to toughen me up. My whoopings came from heinous offenses, such as crying because my goldfish died, or using too many girly colors when I drew a picture. One time he came to pick me up from the kids' Sunday school class after a sermon and saw me playing tea party with the girls and the dolls. He was all smiles at the time, of course, exchanging pleasantries with Miss Linda and thanking her for all the great work she did with the kids. Bad men always have a way of hiding who they really are until they're behind closed doors. Beat my ass bloody once we got home, though. I'll rip your little pecker off if I ever catch you doing that sissy shit again, he had screamed at me between blows. Every time he ever abused me, it was supposed to be a lesson in masculinity. I feel for my poor mama. Any abuse I ever received, she got tenfold. That woman had to spend her life walking on eggshells, knowing a punch would fly her way if she ever stepped out of line. Find out what happens next in Part 2. As a kid, my bedroom was right next to my parents', and I remember hearing her sob through the walls. I was only 8 at the time, and always assumed Dad was hitting her again. Of course, now I realize the reality was probably much worse. People who have learned about my father tend to stare at me in bewilderment when they learn I'm still heavily involved with church. That's because most people don't get to hear the full story, the one I'm going to share with you now. Miss Linda was our Sunday school teacher, and I absolutely adored her. She had a genuine love for teaching and cared about each and every one of us. Was always baking us special treats and using her own money to buy cool crafts and toys for the youth program. When she said Jesus loved us, I believed it, because she showed it. I paid attention to every lesson she ever taught. Find out what happens next in Part 3. One lesson in particular really stuck with me. It was a story about Jesus telling his apostles that even they lacked faith, and that faith, like a mustard seed, could move a mountain. After that lesson, I started praying every single night for Daddy to get the faith he needed to stop being mean to me and Mama. For weeks and weeks I prayed, my little brow wrinkling with determination as I focused on the words in my head, but Daddy just never seemed to change. I was sleeping soundly one night when I felt a gentle breeze tickle me awake. I sat up groggy, looking around my room, and I noticed a tall figure standing in the shadows. I heard a gentle whisper flow through my mind. Be not afraid. The figure stepped forward, revealing itself. It towered over me, multiple sets of thick gray wings forming a robe of feathers that hid its torso. Its head was the snow-white visage of an eyeless lamb. Find out what happens next in Part 4. I was afraid. I burst into tears at the sight of the thing, howling at the top of my lungs, waking my father. It only took a moment before he angrily threw the door open. Boy, I'm gonna whip the living. The words died in his mouth as he took in the sight of the visitor. He stood dumbfounded as the wings unfurled from the strange being, revealing thousands upon thousands of eyes covering its torso, a writhing, blinking swarm. It stepped toward my father and clasped a frail porcelain arm on his shoulder. My father protested as the decrepit arms lifted him off his feet, but was silenced again as the being began to speak. Its words were not the soft whisper it had kindly graced my ears with, but something alien. A harsh grinding sound poured from its mouth as it delivered an ancient sermon, a real message of divinity to my pretender father. Find out what happens next in Part 5. As he listened, his whole being began to tremble at the presence of the visitor. A rot and decay began to spread over him, increasing in severity with the grinding words of the impassioned orator. Boils sprouted over my father like a lotus field in bloom, and his fingers blackened and curled. The grinding reached a crescendo, and my father finally let out a mournful wail. From his face, steam began to rise. His eyes slowly began bubbling and liquefying in the socket, their scalding remains rolling down his cheeks as streaks of molten tears. The being dropped my father to the ground, and its gray wings gently cloaked it again. My mother entered just in time to see a soft smile curl on its lamb-like face before another quick gust flowed over us, and it disappeared into the night. Find out what happens next in Part 6. I had heard my mother cry more than any boy of 8 should have ever had to, but as she cried over my unresponsive father, I could tell she was letting loose tears of joy. That ordeal was years ago. Mama took me out of the church after Daddy died, and I don't blame her. Like I said, I was too young to understand at the time, but it was pretty clear the church was turning a blind eye to my father. Only reason I came back was because God didn't. I've heard people say I don't need church. I'm not afraid of any demons. Well, friend, me either. But the angels, that's another story. Follow for more horror stories.